A black woman is excited to buy a birthday gift for her niece at the mall, completely unaware that a nightmare is about to begin. Fueled by society's biased assumptions, two security guards start tailing her. The prejudice goes further when a jewelry store employee falsely accuses her of stealing. She calls the police, who treat the woman like an actual thief and forcibly detain her. The humiliation quickly turns into burning anger, and when she reveals her true identity, the future of those arrogant people will come crashing down. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The scream of sirens pierced through downtown traffic as Captain Sarah Williams pressed her foot harder against the accelerator. Her unmarked police cruiser weaved between cars with practiced precision, chasing a stolen vehicle that had already crashed into two parked cars. The suspect's sedan took a sharp left turn, tires screaming against asphalt, black smoke billowing from the rear. Unit 7-4 requesting backup on Maple Street. Sarah spoke into her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her knuckles were white against the steering wheel, her jaw set with the determination that had carried her through 22 years on the force. The stolen car suddenly lurched to the right, the driver losing control as he tried to navigate a narrow alley. Metal scraped against brick walls, sparks flying in every direction. Sarah saw her opening. She gunned the engine and cut off the suspect's escape route, her cruiser blocking the alley's exit with surgical precision. The suspect stumbled out of his wrecked vehicle. Hands raised his face, pale with defeat. Sarah was out of her car in seconds, weapon drawn, her movements fluid and controlled. "You're done running," she called out, her voice carrying the authority that came with being a police captain. "Hands behind your head now." The man complied without resistance, perhaps recognizing the futility of fighting someone who had clearly outmaneuvered him completely. Sarah cuffed him with practiced efficiency, reading him his rights as backup units arrived on scene. The familiar weight of justice being served settled over her shoulders like a comfortable coat. "Nice work, Captain," Officer Carter said as he approached, genuine admiration in his voice. "That was some driving." Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead, feeling the satisfaction that came with another criminal off the streets. But as the adrenaline began to fade, she glanced at her watch and her heart skipped a beat. 5:30 in the evening. Friday. Her hand flew to her forehead in sudden realization. "Oh my God, Emma's birthday!" She exclaimed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Her 15-year-old niece had been talking about her 16th birthday party for months, and Sarah had promised to find the perfect gift. Carter chuckled. "Go on, Captain. We've got this wrapped up here. The paperwork can wait until Monday." Sarah felt a mix of gratitude and urgency wash over her. She hurried back to her cruiser mind, already shifting gears from police work to family obligations. The drive to the precinct to change clothes felt endless, every red light an eternity. In the locker room, she quickly shed her uniform and badge, transforming from Captain Sarah Williams into simply Sarah Ant, family member gift shopper. She caught her reflection in the mirror as she pulled on a soft blue sweater and dark jeans. Without the uniform, she looked like any other woman heading out for evening shopping. Her leather purse, a splurge she had saved 3 months to afford, hung perfectly over her shoulder. For the first time all week, she felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. The drive to Riverside Mall was peaceful, a stark contrast to the high-speed chase that had ended her workday. Sarah rolled down her windows, letting the cool evening air wash over her face. She found herself smiling, thinking about Emma's reaction when she opened whatever perfect gift Sarah managed to find. The mall parking lot was busy with Friday evening shoppers' families enjoying dinner together, teenagers hanging out in groups. Sarah parked near the main entrance, taking a deep breath as she turned off the engine. The familiar sounds of normal life surrounded her. Car doors slamming, children laughing, the distant hum of traffic. It was exactly what she needed after a week of crime scenes and criminal investigations. Walking through the mall's main entrance, Sarah felt her body truly relax for the first time in days. The warm lighting, the soft background music, the casual conversations of other shoppers. It all felt wonderfully ordinary. She paused near the central fountain, watching families stroll past, couples holding hands, elderly people sitting on benches, and people watching. "This is nice," she murmured to herself, allowing her police instincts to quiet down. No radio chatter, no emergency calls, no criminals to chase. Just a simple evening of shopping for someone she loved. She began walking toward the jewelry section, her mind already picturing Emma's face lighting up with joy. Sarah had noticed her niece admiring delicate silver jewelry lately, something sophisticated but age-appropriate. The perfect gift was out there somewhere waiting to be found. The sounds of the mall enveloped her like a gentle embrace. Children's laughter echoing from the play area, the soft classical music from nearby stores, the murmur of conversation from the food court. After 22 years of dealing with the worst humanity had to offer these simple, innocent sounds, felt like a healing balm on her soul. Sarah Williams had no idea that in the next few minutes, her peaceful evening would shatter into pieces and her life would change forever. Sarah's peaceful mood began to shift as she walked deeper into the mall. Something felt different, though she couldn't quite place what it was. Her police instincts never fully dormant. Even off-duty began to stir like a sleeping guard dog catching an unfamiliar scent. She paused in front of a clothing store window, pretending to examine a display of autumn sweaters while her trained eyes scanned the reflection in the glass. There, two security guards stationed near the information kiosk, both looking directly at her. One of them, a tall man with graying temples whose name tag read Thompson, was speaking quietly into his radio while maintaining eye contact with her reflection. Sarah's stomach tightened. The familiar, unwelcome sensation of being watched crept up her spine like ice water. She had experienced this feeling countless times before, in department stores, restaurants, even grocery stores. The weight of suspicious eyes following her every movement simply because of the color of her skin. She continued walking, hoping she was wrong, hoping this time would be different. But the footsteps behind her maintained their distance perfectly, neither gaining nor falling back. Professional surveillance. Her heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from the deep, familiar anger that came with being hunted while innocent. Target is mobile, heading toward the east wing. She heard Thompson's voice carry across the corridor, barely concealed behind a fake cough. Black female, brown leather purse, blue sweater. Keep visual contact. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Target. Not customer, not shopper, not person. Target. She gripped her purse strap tighter, her knuckles showing white against her dark skin. The peaceful evening she had been looking forward to evaporated like morning mist. Sarah caught sight of the second guard in another store window's reflection. Martinez, according to his name tag, looked younger and less comfortable with the situation. He kept glancing between Thompson and Sarah, uncertainty written across his features, but he followed orders, maintaining his position in the surveillance pattern. The mall's cheerful atmosphere suddenly felt oppressive. The same background music that had seemed soothing moments before now sounded hollow and mocking. Other shoppers continued their evening routines, completely unaware that a hunt was taking place right beside them. Children laughed and played while their parents browsed, oblivious to the racial profiling unfolding in their midst. Sarah's mind raced through her options. She could confront them directly, flash her badge, and watch their faces drain of color when they realized their mistake. She could call their supervisor and report their behavior. She could simply leave and shop somewhere else. But something deeper than anger was building inside her chest. 22 years of this. 22 years of being followed, suspected, and treated like a criminal for the crime of shopping while black. How many times had she swallowed her pride, walked away, chosen to be the bigger person? Not tonight, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the mall's ambient noise. Tonight she was tired of running from other people's ignorance. She deliberately slowed her pace, testing their reaction. Sure enough, Thompson and Martinez adjusted their positions, maintaining their surveillance distance. They thought they were being subtle, but to Sarah's trained eye, their movements were as obvious as a neon sign. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, a police captain with over 2 decades of experience in law enforcement, being tracked through a mall like a common criminal by security guards who probably couldn't pass a basic investigation course. The same instincts that made her excellent at her job now screamed warnings about the web being woven around her. Thompson spoke into his radio again, his voice carrying just enough for her to hear. Still mobile, approaching the jewelry section. Request backup if she enters any high-value stores. High-value stores, as if she couldn't afford to shop wherever she wanted, as if the leather purse on her shoulder, the result of months of saving, somehow marked her as unworthy of browsing expensive items. The assumption cut deep, striking at every stereotype and prejudice she had fought against her entire career. Sarah paused at the directory map, using the moment to study her followers more carefully. Thompson moved with the swagger of someone who had never been challenged, never been wrong, never had to question his assumptions about people. Martinez seemed less certain, shifting his weight from foot to foot, occasionally looking around as if hoping someone else would take charge. The mall's evening crowd continued to flow around this silent drama. Teenagers texted while walking, couples debated dinner plans, elderly shoppers examined store sales. Normal people living normal lives, while Sarah found herself cast as the villain in a story she never agreed to be part of. Her reflection in the directory's glass surface showed a woman who looked calm and composed on the surface, but her own eyes revealed the storm building within. The same eyes that had stared down armed criminals and corrupt politicians now burned with the fire of injustice. Thompson's radio crackled again. Copy that, maintaining visual. Subject appears to be window shopping. No suspicious activity detected. No suspicious activity. Because walking through a mall while black was apparently suspicious enough to warrant surveillance. Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity, but the sound died in her throat, strangled by years of accumulated frustration. She straightened her shoulders and began walking toward the jewelry section with renewed purpose. If they wanted to follow her, let them follow. If they wanted to assume the worst about her, she would give them a lesson they would never forget. The hunt was on, but Sarah Williams was nobody's prey. Sarah approached the entrance to Diamond Dreams jewelry store with deliberate calm, her training helping her maintain composure despite the surveillance she knew was continuing behind her. The store's gleaming display windows showcased elegant pieces under soft, warm lighting, necklaces that caught the light like captured starlight rings that promised eternal love, bracelets delicate enough for a 16-year-old's wrist. The moment she stepped inside, the atmosphere changed like walking into a different climate. The air conditioning felt colder somehow, and the soft jazz playing overhead seemed to falter. Behind the main counter, a woman in her 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair looked up from organizing inventory. Her name tag read Jennifer McCoy in elegant script, but there was nothing elegant about the way her expression hardened upon seeing Sarah. "May I help you?" Jennifer's voice carried all the warmth of a winter morning, each word carefully measured and delivered with barely concealed suspicion. Her hands remained busy with the jewelry she had been arranging, but her eyes never left Sarah's face. Sarah forced a smile, drawing on years of experience dealing with hostile witnesses and uncooperative suspects. "Good evening. I'm looking for something special for my niece's 16th birthday. Maybe a necklace or bracelet?" Jennifer's gaze immediately dropped to Sarah's purse, lingering there for several uncomfortable seconds before traveling back up to meet her eyes. "Our pieces start at quite a high price point," she said, her tone suggesting that perhaps Sarah might be more comfortable shopping elsewhere. The insult was delivered so smoothly, so professionally, that anyone listening might mistake it for helpful information rather than the calculated dismissal it actually was. Sarah felt heat rise in her chest, but her voice remained steady. "I understand. I'd still like to see what you have available." Through the store's large windows, Sarah could see Thompson positioned at a nearby bench, pretending to read a newspaper while keeping her in clear view. Martinez stood closer, examining a directory display that gave him a perfect angle to observe the store's interior. Other shoppers passed by obliviously, their evening mall visits unmarked by the tension building inside Diamond Dreams. Jennifer moved with deliberate slowness toward the display cases, each step seeming to communicate her reluctance to serve this particular customer. "These are all locked cases," she announced loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. "For security reasons, items can only be removed by authorized staff members." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Of course, security is important. She moved closer to examine a display case filled with delicate silver pieces, her eyes immediately drawn to a beautiful necklace with a small crescent moon pendant surrounded by tiny crystals. It was perfect, sophisticated enough for a teenager who was eager to grow up, but sweet enough to preserve her innocence. Emma would love it. "That one," Sarah said, pointing to the necklace, "the silver piece with the moon. Could I see it, please?" Jennifer's hesitation was palpable. She stood frozen for several seconds, as if the simple request had presented her with an impossible dilemma. Her eyes darted between Sarah and the display case, then toward the store's entrance, where she could clearly see the security guards positioned outside. That's a very expensive piece." Jennifer finally said, her voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. Perhaps something from our more affordable collection would be more appropriate. Sarah felt the familiar burn of discrimination in her throat, but she swallowed it down. I'd like to see the moon necklace, please. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Other customers in the store began to notice the tension, their conversations quieting as they sensed something was wrong. An elderly couple browsing wedding rings glanced over with curious expressions. A young mother with her teenage daughter stopped their discussion about earrings to observe the standoff developing at the main counter. Jennifer's hands trembled slightly as she finally reached for her keys, the metal jangling like wind chimes in the oppressive quiet. She approached the display case as if it contained explosives rather than jewelry, her movements jerky and uncertain. Through the store windows, Sarah noticed Thompson speaking into his radio again, his eyes never leaving her. Martinez had abandoned all pretense of examining the directory and was now standing directly outside the store, his hand resting on his radio as if preparing for immediate action. The lock on the display case clicked open with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the tense atmosphere. Jennifer's breathing was audible as she carefully lifted the moon necklace from its velvet display, handling it as if Sarah might snatch it from her hands at any moment. "Here," Jennifer said, her voice barely above a whisper. She held the necklace at arm's length, maintaining maximum distance while still technically complying with Sarah's request. The piece was even more beautiful up close. The silver caught the store's lighting perfectly, and the tiny crystals around the moon seemed to dance with their own inner fire. Sarah could already imagine it resting against Emma's collarbone, the perfect complement to her niece's radiant smile. "It's lovely," Sarah said genuinely, her appreciation for the craftsmanship momentarily overriding her anger at the situation. "How much is it?" $450. Jennifer replied quickly, as if the price might scare Sarah away. Sarah nodded without hesitation. "I'll take it." The words seemed to hit Jennifer like a physical blow. Her face went pale, and she clutched the necklace tighter, her knuckles white against the silver chain. The other customers in the store had stopped all pretense of shopping and were now openly staring at the drama unfolding before them. Outside, Thompson was speaking urgently into his radio, his body language suggesting that the situation had somehow escalated beyond his expectations. Martinez moved closer to the store's entrance, his hand now resting on his belt, where Sarah assumed he carried handcuffs and possibly a weapon. I'll need to," Jennifer stammered, her eyes darting around the store as if looking for escape routes. "Let me just verify the inventory." Sarah's police instincts were now screaming warnings at her. Something was about to happen, something planned and deliberate. The web that had been spinning around her since she entered the mall was tightening, and she was about to discover just how caught she really was. The soft jazz continued playing overhead, a mockingly peaceful soundtrack to the storm that was about to break. Jennifer clutched the moon necklace against her chest like a shield, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Sarah watched with growing alarm as the woman's composure crumbled before her eyes. The other customers in the store had gone completely silent, sensing that something terrible was about to unfold. "Actually," Jennifer's voice cracked as she spoke, "I need to check our inventory system. This piece, I think it might have been sold already." Sarah's eyebrows rose, but it was just in the display case. How could it be sold if it was on display? "Sometimes our system doesn't update immediately." Jennifer stammered her lie, transparent and desperate. She was backing away from Sarah, now still clutching the necklace, her face growing paler by the second. Through the store windows, Sarah could see Thompson speaking urgently into his radio, his gestures becoming more animated. Martinez had positioned himself directly outside the entrance, his hand now openly resting on his equipment belt. Other mall security personnel were converging on their location, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Sarah's police training kicked into high gear. This wasn't random. This wasn't a simple case of poor customer service or even basic racial profiling. This was orchestrated, planned, and she was walking straight into whatever trap they had set. "Ma'am," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm and professional, "if there's an issue with the inventory, perhaps we could resolve it quickly. I'd like to purchase that necklace for my niece's birthday." Jennifer's eyes darted around the store like a trapped animal seeking escape. The elderly couple had moved closer, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. The young mother placed a protective arm around her teenage daughter, both of them watching the scene unfold with growing unease. I can't." Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper now. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, her demeanor changed completely. Her back straightened, her grip on the necklace tightened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a conviction that hadn't been there moments before. "You took something," she announced loudly, her words cutting through the store's tense atmosphere like a blade. "I saw you slip something into your purse." The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The air seemed to leave her lungs as the words registered. Around the store, the other customers gasped, their faces showing shock and disbelief. The elderly man stepped protectively in front of his wife. The teenage girl pressed closer to her mother, both of them staring at Sarah with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Excuse me," Sarah's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "What did you just say?" "You took a ring." Jennifer continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, as if she was drawing courage from some unseen source. "A diamond ring from this case. I watched you slip it into your purse when you thought I wasn't looking." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely fabricated that for a moment she couldn't form words. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her mind struggling to process the enormity of what was happening. "That is absolutely false," she finally managed, her voice shaking with outrage and disbelief. "I haven't touched anything except the necklace you just showed me. I haven't even been near any other display cases." But Jennifer was already moving her hand, reaching for the phone behind the counter. "Security!" she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the store and into the corridor beyond. "I need security at Diamond Dreams immediately. I have a shoplifter in custody." The words echoed through Sarah's mind like a death sentence. 22 years of impeccable service, of building trust in the community, of fighting for justice and equality, all threatened to crumble because of one woman's malicious lie. Thompson and Martinez burst through the store entrance as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. Behind them came a third figure who made Sarah's blood run cold. Officer Michael Reeves strode into the store with the swagger of a man who had never met a situation he couldn't dominate through intimidation and force. Reeves was everything Sarah despised about bad cops. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with a kind of aggressive confidence that came from years of never being challenged, never being held accountable. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his badge polished to a mirror shine, but his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator who had found his prey. "What do we have here?" Reeves boomed, his voice filling the small store like thunder. He didn't wait for an answer before his gaze locked onto Sarah, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Not surprise, but satisfaction, as if this was exactly what he had been hoping for. Jennifer rushed forward, the necklace still clutched in her hand. "Officer, thank God you're here. This woman stole a diamond ring from my display case. I watched her do it." Sarah found her voice drawing on every ounce of professional training she possessed. "Officer, there's been a serious misunderstanding. I haven't stolen anything. I was simply trying to purchase this necklace for my niece's birthday. Perhaps we could review the security footage to clear this up quickly." Reeves didn't even pretend to consider her suggestion. Instead, he stepped closer, using his size to intimidate her, his presence filling her personal space like a toxic cloud. "Lady, I don't have time for your stories. Empty your purse on the counter, now." The command hit Sarah like a slap. Around them, the other customers had backed away, creating a circle of space, as if witnessing something they knew was wrong, but were too frightened to intervene. Cell phones appeared in hand, some people beginning to record the confrontation that was escalating before their eyes. "Officer," Sarah tried again, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. "I understand you're responding to a complaint, but I have rights. You can't search my personal property without probable cause or my consent. The security cameras would show that I haven't taken anything." Reeves' face darkened at her refusal to immediately comply. "Probable cause," he snarled, stepping even closer. "I've got a store employee saying she watched you steal merchandise. That's all the probable cause I need." He grabbed his radio with theatrical flourish, speaking loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "Dispatch, I need backup at Diamond Dreams in Riverside Mall. I've got a subject refusing to cooperate with a theft investigation. Possible resisting arrest situation developing." The words resisting arrest sent a chill through Sarah's body. She knew exactly what those words meant in the hands of an officer like Reeves. They were the magic phrase that justified any level of force, any escalation, any violence that might follow. "I'm not resisting anything," Sarah said, firmly addressing not just Reeves, but the growing audience of onlookers and their recording phones. "I'm simply requesting that you follow proper procedure. Check the security footage. It will show that I haven't stolen anything." Thompson, who had been standing near the entrance, moved closer to Sarah's left side. Martinez positioned himself on her right. The three men formed a loose triangle around her, their body language aggressive and threatening. The message was clear. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and her options were rapidly disappearing. "Last chance." Reeves growled, his hand dropping to rest on his weapon in a gesture that was both threatening and deliberate. "Empty the purse, or I empty it for you." The store had gone completely silent except for the soft jazz still playing overhead, creating a surreal soundtrack to the nightmare unfolding. Sarah could feel the weight of every eye in the place, could sense the tension crackling in the air, like electricity before a storm. Jennifer stood behind the counter, still clutching the moon necklace that had started this entire confrontation. Her face showed a mixture of fear and determination, as if she was committed to seeing this through to its conclusion regardless of the consequences. Sarah's mind raced through her options. She could comply with the illegal search and hope that when nothing was found, the situation would de-escalate. She could continue to assert her rights and risk being forcibly searched or worse. She could reveal her identity as a police captain and hope that professional courtesy might prevail. But as she looked into Reeves' eyes, she saw something that made her decision for her. This wasn't about stolen jewelry or store security. This was about power and control, about putting someone in their place, about enforcing an unspoken hierarchy that had nothing to do with law or justice. Reeves was enjoying this. The chance to dominate, to humiliate, to exercise absolute authority over someone who dared to question his commands. Sarah had seen that look before in the eyes of every corrupt cop she had ever investigated, every bad actor she had helped remove from the force. "Officer Reeves," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent store. "Before this goes any further, I think there's something you should know." But Reeves wasn't interested in listening. His patience, what little he had possessed, was exhausted. "Time's up," he snarled, lunging forward to grab Sarah's purse. The moment his hands touched her property, everything changed. The confrontation that had been building like a slow-burning fuse suddenly exploded into action, and Sarah Williams was about to discover just how far some people would go to maintain their version of order. The moment Reeves' hands grabbed her purse, Sarah's training took over. She stepped back, pulling the bag away from his grasp with a fluid motion that spoke of years of defensive tactics training. The sudden movement caused Reeves to stumble slightly, his face flushing red with embarrassment and rage. "Don't you dare resist me," he roared, his voice echoing off the store's walls. Without warning, he lunged forward again, this time grabbing Sarah's left arm with enough force to leave bruises. Thompson moved in from the other side, seizing her right arm, while Martinez positioned himself to block any escape route. The elderly couple in the corner gasped in horror. The teenage girl started crying, clinging to her mother, who was frantically trying to shield her daughter's eyes while simultaneously recording everything on her phone. Other shoppers outside the store had stopped to stare through the windows, some pulling out their own devices to capture what was clearly escalating into something terrible. "Let go of me," Sarah demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. But these men weren't listening to reason. They were operating on something much more primitive, the need to dominate, to control, to put someone they saw as lesser firmly in their place. Reeves twisted her arm behind her back with unnecessary force, causing Sarah to gasp in pain. "You're under arrest for theft and resisting arrest," he announced loudly, playing to his audience. He pulled out his handcuffs with theatrical flourish, the metal catching the store's bright lights. "This is excessive force," Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the pain shooting through her shoulder. "I haven't stolen anything, and you have no legal justification for this arrest." But her words fell on deaf ears. Reeves was already forcing her hands behind her back, the handcuffs clicking shut with a sound that seemed to reverberate through the silent store like a gunshot. The metal bit into her wrists, deliberately tightened beyond necessity, a small cruelty that spoke volumes about the kind of officer Michael Reeves truly was. The crowd outside the store had grown significantly. Mall security was trying to manage the gathering onlookers, but more people kept arriving, drawn by the spectacle of a well-dressed black woman being arrested in broad daylight. Cell phones were everywhere, recording from multiple angles, live streaming the confrontation to social media platforms where it would soon explode across the internet. As Reeves began marching her toward the store's exit, Sarah made her decision. She had tried to handle this quietly, professionally, by the book. But these men had chosen escalation over investigation force over facts. They had made their choice, and now she would make hers. "Before we go any further," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the store and out into the mall corridor where the crowd was growing larger by the second, "I think all of you should know something important." Reeves yanked on her arm, trying to keep her moving. "Save it for your lawyer, lady. You can tell your sob story to the judge." But Sarah planted her feet, using her body weight to resist his forward momentum. She turned to face the crowd of onlookers, many of whom were still recording their phones held high like torches in the gathering darkness of injustice. "My name is Captain Sarah Williams," she announced, her voice projecting with the kind of authority that commanded attention. "I am the commanding officer of the 12th Precinct Police Department, and I have served this community with honor for 22 years. The words hit the crowd like a physical force. Gasps rippled through the assembled onlookers. Several people stopped recording to stare in open-mouthed shock. Others began recording more frantically, realizing they were witnessing something that would make headlines. Reeves' grip on her arm loosened slightly as the implications began to sink in. His face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then a sickly pale realization that he might have made a catastrophic mistake. "That's impossible," he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're lying." Sarah turned to look at him directly, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of 2 decades of authority. "My badge is in my left jacket pocket. My department identification is in my wallet. Would you like to check Officer Reeves?" The name recognition hit him like a slap. Every cop in the city knew Captain Sarah Williams by reputation, if not by sight. She was the officer who had cleaned up 3 corrupt precincts, who had personally arrested 2 dirty cops, who had testified before the city council about police reform. She was exactly the kind of officer that men like Reeves feared most. Honest, incorruptible, and powerful enough to end careers. Thompson and Martinez exchanged nervous glances. Martinez looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Even Jennifer, still standing behind the counter with the moon necklace clutched in her hands, seemed to realize that the situation had spiraled far beyond anything she had intended. "Check my pocket," Sarah said again, her voice steady and commanding despite the handcuffs cutting into her wrists. "You'll find my badge and identification. You'll also find that I've never been arrested, never been accused of any crime, and have commendations from the mayor's office hanging on my office wall." The crowd's reaction was immediate and electric. "She's a police captain," someone called out from the back. "They arrested a police captain for shopping." The whispers spread through the growing assembly like wildfire. More phones appeared. More people began live streaming. Someone started a hashtag that would trend within the hour. The story was already beyond anyone's ability to control or contain. Reeves stood frozen, his hand still gripping Sarah's arm, but his confidence completely shattered. He looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would tell him what to do, how to salvage this disaster. But Thompson and Martinez had backed away, distancing themselves from what was clearly about to become a career-ending catastrophe. "Well," Sarah asked, her voice cutting through his paralysis, "are you going to verify my identity, or are you going to continue with this illegal arrest based on a false accusation?" The crowd pressed closer, their voices growing louder and more demanding. "Let her go!" someone shouted. "This is police brutality," called another. The mall security guards looked overwhelmed, unsure how to handle a situation that had escalated far beyond their training or authority. Reeves' face was now a sickly gray color. His hand trembled as he reached toward Sarah's jacket pocket, knowing that whatever he found there would determine whether he finished his shift as a police officer or as the subject of an internal affairs investigation. The moment stretched like eternity, with dozens of cameras recording every second, every expression, every breath. The soft jazz music still played in the jewelry store behind them, absurdly peaceful soundtrack to the storm that was about to break over everyone involved. Sarah Williams stood perfectly still in her handcuffs, her dignity intact despite her circumstances, waiting for the truth to finally set her free. The crowd waited with her, their collective breath held, sensing that they were witnessing something that would change everything. The badge in her pocket felt heavier than it ever had before, weighted with the responsibility of representing not just herself, but everyone who had ever been falsely accused, everyone who had ever been judged by their appearance, everyone who had ever stood alone against injustice and refused to back down. In that moment, surrounded by strangers who were becoming allies, Captain Sarah Williams prepared to teach Officer Michael Reeves and everyone watching exactly what it meant to mess with the wrong person. Reeves' trembling hand finally withdrew Sarah's badge from her jacket pocket. The gold shield caught the mall's fluorescent lighting, its polished surface reflecting the shocked faces of the crowd that had gathered around them. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were telling him. Captain Sarah Williams, 12th Precinct. He read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. The badge felt impossibly heavy in his palm, weighted with the knowledge that his career had just imploded in spectacular fashion. The crowd's reaction was immediate and thunderous. Cheers erupted from the assembled onlookers, mixed with angry shouts demanding Sarah's immediate release. Cell phones captured every second as Reeves fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely insert them into the handcuffs. "Get those cuffs off her right now," someone yelled from the back of the crowd. "This is a disgrace," shouted another. The mall's security guards had completely lost control of the situation, with more people arriving every minute as word spread through social media. As the handcuffs finally clicked open, Sarah rubbed her wrists where the metal had bitten into her skin. Red marks were already forming visible evidence of the excessive force that had been used against her. She took back her badge with quiet dignity, her eyes never leaving Reeves's face as she pinned it to her jacket. "Officer Reeves," she said, her voice carrying clearly over the crowd's noise, "I suggest you start thinking very carefully about how you're going to explain this in your incident report." 3 days later, Sarah sat across from Maria Rodriguez in the attorney's downtown office. Maria was a friend from law school, a fierce advocate for civil rights, who had built her reputation taking on cases that other lawyers wouldn't touch. The conference room table was covered with files, legal documents, and a laptop displaying what looked like a complex organizational chart. "Sarah, what happened to you wasn't an isolated incident," Maria said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I've been digging into complaints against mall security and the police department, and what I found is going to shock you." She opened the first file folder, revealing a stack of police reports at least 3 inches thick. 65 arrests in the past 18 months, all at or near Riverside Mall, all involving black shoppers, all resulting in charges of theft, resisting arrest, or both. Sarah leaned forward, her investigative instincts fully engaged. 65. That's not random profiling, Maria. That's systematic. It gets worse. Maria continued flipping through the documents. Look at the pattern of dispositions. 92% of these cases ended in plea bargains. The defendants accepted deals rather than risk trial, usually resulting in probation and hefty fines. Sarah's blood ran cold as she began to understand the scope of what she was seeing. Probation through which company? Maria's smile was grim. Riverside Supervision Services, a private company that charges monthly supervision fees, mandatory counseling fees, drug testing fees, electronic monitoring fees. Some people end up paying thousands of dollars over their probation period. And if they can't pay, probation violation, back to jail, more fees, more probation. It's a cycle designed to extract maximum profit from people who can least afford it. Sarah stood up and began pacing the small conference room, her mind racing through the implications. We need to look at the corporate structure. Who owns Riverside Supervision Services? Maria pulled up a document on her laptop. That's where it gets really interesting. The company is owned by a holding corporation called Riverside Development LLC, the same company that owns the mall. So they profile shoppers, arrange false arrests, force plea bargains, and then profit from the probation supervision. Sarah said, her voice hard with disgust. It's a criminal enterprise masquerading as law enforcement. There's more, Maria said, opening another file. I ran financial records on the key players. Officer Reeves has made some very interesting deposits to his personal account over the past 2 years, always in cash, always just under the reporting threshold. Sarah examined the bank statements, her experienced eye catching patterns that would be invisible to most people. These deposits correlate with the arrest dates. He's being paid per arrest. The mall security guards are getting bonuses too. Thompson received a $5,000 performance bonus last quarter. Martinez got promoted after his arrest numbers went up. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Sarah had investigated corruption before, but nothing this systematic, this calculated in its cruelty. They weren't just stealing money. They were destroying lives, separating families, creating criminal records that would follow people forever. "We need more evidence," Sarah said, her voice taking on the tone she used when briefing her detectives. Bank records, phone records, internal communications between the mall and the police department. Maria nodded. "I've already filed discovery motions for your case. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know. I've been getting calls from other victims. People who saw your arrest video online and recognized the same officers who arrested them." She handed Sarah a legal pad filled with names and phone numbers. 23 people have contacted me in the past 3 days. They all want to tell their stories." Sarah looked at the list, her heart heavy with the knowledge that each name represented a life, disrupted a family, damaged a person who had been processed through this criminal machine. Some she recognized from her own precinct's arrest records. "Maria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Sarah's voice was deadly serious. "How deep do you think this goes? Is this just Reeves and a few bad actors, or are we looking at institutional corruption?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "Based on what I've seen, the volume of cases, the consistency of the outcomes, the coordination required between mall security patrol officers and the court system, Sarah, I think this goes all the way to the top." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had dedicated her entire adult life to law enforcement, had believed in the system even when it failed her personally. The possibility that her own department, her own chain of command might be complicit in this scheme felt like a betrayal too deep to process. "What's our next step?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "We build the case methodically, document everything, interview every victim who's willing to talk, follow the money trail until we have ironclad proof of the conspiracy." Maria leaned forward, her expression intense. "But Sarah, you need to understand what you're up against. These people have already shown they're willing to destroy careers and lives to protect their operation. They're not going to go quietly." Sarah thought about the red marks still visible on her wrists, about the humiliation of being dragged through the mall in handcuffs, about the look of satisfaction in Reeves' eyes when he thought he had successfully put another black woman in her place. "Let them come," she said quietly. "I've spent 22 years fighting for justice. I'm not going to stop now just because the criminals are wearing badges." Outside Maria's office window, the city continued its daily rhythm, unaware that 2 women were preparing to challenge a system of corruption that had operated with impunity for years. But Sarah Williams was no longer just seeking justice for herself. She was preparing to tear down an entire criminal enterprise, no matter how high up it went or how much it cost her personally. The investigation was just beginning, and Sarah had every intention of seeing it through to the very end. 2 weeks into the investigation, Sarah's world began to crumble in ways she had never anticipated. The first sign of retaliation came on a Tuesday morning when she arrived at her office to find a message waiting on her desk. The envelope bore no return address, just her name, written in block letters that looked deliberately disguised. Inside was a single photograph, Sarah leaving Maria Rodriguez's law office the previous day. Someone had been following her, documenting her movements, tracking her investigation. Across the bottom of the photo, someone had written in red ink, "Back off or face the consequences." Sarah's hands trembled as she studied the image. The photographer had been positioned across the street using a telephoto lens that captured not just her face, but also the license plates of nearby cars, the building's address, even the timestamp visible on a nearby bank's digital display. This wasn't amateur surveillance. This was professional-grade intimidation. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Amanda Foster, the investigative journalist who had been helping them document the corruption. "Sarah, something terrible has happened. I'm at General Hospital. Please come immediately." The drive to the hospital felt endless, Sarah's mind racing through increasingly dark possibilities. Amanda had been fearless in pursuing the story, interviewing victims, requesting public records, building the media case that would expose the conspiracy to the entire city. If they had targeted her, Sarah found Amanda in the emergency room, her face a map of bruises and cuts. Her left arm was in a cast, and she winced with every breath she took. Despite her injuries, her eyes blazed with the same fierce determination that had made her one of the city's most respected journalists. "They got me walking to my car last night," Amanda said, her voice hoarse but steady. "3 men. They knew exactly what they were doing. Hurt me enough to send a message, but not enough to kill me." Sarah pulled a chair close to the hospital bed, her anger building like a fire in her chest. "Did you see their faces? Get any identifying information?" "One of them flashed a badge when they grabbed me. Police badge, Sarah. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Bad enough that corrupt officers were taking money to make false arrests, but crossing the line into assault into threatening journalists. That was the behavior of a criminal organization that felt untouchable, protected from consequences. "Amanda, I'm so sorry. This is my fault for getting you involved. Don't you dare apologize," Amanda said fiercely, struggling to sit up straighter in the hospital bed. "They did this because we're getting close to something big, because we're threatening their entire operation." She reached for her phone with her good hand, pulling up a series of documents. "Before they grabbed me, I was following a money trail. Payments from the mall's parent company to something called Security Consulting Services. Guess who's listed as the primary contractor?" Sarah leaned closer to read the screen. "Detective Lieutenant Harris." Her heart sank as she recognized the name. Harris was her immediate supervisor, a man she had worked with for 8 years, someone she had considered a friend and mentor. "It gets worse," Amanda continued. "Those security consulting payments, they're being distributed to at least 12 different officers across 3 precincts. Sarah, this isn't just corruption. It's a criminal conspiracy that goes straight up the chain of command." The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Sarah had known there were bad actors in the department, officers who bent rules or looked the other way when convenient. But this was systematic, organized, institutionalized corruption that infected multiple levels of law enforcement. Her phone rang, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. The caller ID showed her own precinct number. "Captain Williams, this is Sergeant Johnson. You need to report to Internal Affairs immediately. There's been a complaint filed against you." Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of complaint? Conduct unbecoming an officer, abuse of authority, false imprisonment. "Captain, you need to get down here now." The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in disbelief. They were using the system against her, filing false charges to neutralize her investigation before it could expose their operation. "I have to go," she told Amanda. "They're coming after me directly now." "Sarah, be careful. If they're willing to beat up a journalist, they won't hesitate to destroy a police captain who threatens their money." The Internal Affairs office felt like a courtroom designed for executions. Sarah sat across from Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, a career bureaucrat who looked like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. Between them lay a thick folder containing what appeared to be dozens of documents. "Captain Williams, you're being placed on administrative suspension pending investigation into serious allegations of misconduct." Morrison opened the folder and began reading from a formal complaint. "Officer Michael Reeves alleges that on the night of your arrest, you used your position to intimidate witnesses, made false statements about your identity, and attempted to obstruct a legitimate investigation." Sarah felt her jaw drop. "Lieutenant Colonel, that's completely backwards. Reeves made an illegal arrest based on a false accusation. I have witnesses' video evidence. Officer Reeves has filed a supplemental report claiming you struck him during the arrest. Assault on a police officer, Captain. That's a felony charge." The room seemed to spin around Sarah as the implications sank in. They weren't just trying to destroy her career. They were setting her up for criminal prosecution. A conviction would mean prison time, the loss of her pension, the complete destruction of everything she had worked for over 2 decades. "This is retaliation," she said, her voice barely controlled. "Pure and simple retaliation for investigating corruption in the department." Morrison's expression remained carefully neutral. "Captain, I'm required to investigate all complaints filed against departmental personnel. Your badge and weapon, please." The moment felt surreal, like watching someone else's life implode in slow motion. Sarah removed her badge, the same badge that had identified her as a victim rather than a criminal just weeks before, and placed it on Morrison's desk. Her service weapon followed the holster, feeling impossibly light and empty against her hip. You're confined to administrative duties pending resolution of this matter. Any contact with witnesses or evidence related to your case is strictly prohibited. Sarah walked out of the Internal Affairs office feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. 22 years of service reduced to a suspension and a criminal investigation. Her colleagues avoided eye contact as she walked through the precinct, their silence speaking volumes about how quickly loyalty evaporated when careers were threatened. That evening, Sarah sat in her empty apartment staring at the local news coverage of her suspension. The reporter described her as a troubled officer facing serious allegations of misconduct. There was no mention of the corruption investigation, no context about the systematic abuse that had led to this moment. Her phone buzzed with text messages, but most were from numbers she didn't recognize. Anonymous threats, racist slurs, people telling her she deserved whatever happened to her. The few supportive messages came from family and close friends, but even they seemed uncertain about what to believe. The isolation was deliberate, Sarah realized. By suspending her and filing criminal charges, they had effectively silenced her voice and discredited any allegations she might make. Who would believe a suspended police captain facing felony charges? But as she sat in the darkness of her apartment, Sarah Williams made a promise to herself. They had underestimated her resolve, mistaken her temporary setback for permanent defeat. She had been knocked down, but she was far from knocked out. The war was just beginning, and Sarah intended to win it. Sarah's phone buzzed at 6 in the morning, pulling her from a restless sleep filled with nightmares about courtrooms and prison cells. The caller ID showed Maria Rodriguez, and her attorney's voice was electric with excitement. "Sarah, you need to see this. The video is everywhere. Everywhere." Sarah stumbled to her laptop, still groggy from another sleepless night. The first thing she saw was the view counter on the original arrest video, 7.8 million views and climbing. But that was just the beginning. The hashtag #justice for Williams was trending worldwide, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of police misconduct and racial profiling. "My God," Sarah whispered, scrolling through comment after comment of support. People from across the country were sharing the video, adding their own experiences, demanding accountability from law enforcement. "It gets better," Maria said over the phone. "Check the local news." Sarah switched to the local news website and felt her heart skip a beat. The headline read, "Massive protest planned at Riverside Mall. Thousands expected to demand justice for suspended police captain." The article described how the video had sparked outrage far beyond their city's borders. Civil rights organizations, community groups, and ordinary citizens were organizing what promised to be the largest protest in the city's recent history. The demonstration was planned for that very afternoon. By noon, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of Riverside Mall's parking lot, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses to avoid immediate recognition. What she saw took her breath away. The entire front of the mall was packed with protesters, their signs creating a sea of messages demanding justice, accountability, and reform. "Justice for Captain Williams." The crowd chanted their voices, carrying across the parking lot and into the surrounding neighborhoods. No more racist cops, no more corrupt arrests. Sarah moved through the crowd, overwhelmed by the diversity of people who had come out to support her. Elderly grandmothers stood next to college students. White families held signs alongside black activists. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, too young to understand the specifics, but old enough to recognize that something important was happening. Near the main entrance, a young woman with a megaphone was addressing the crowd. Sarah recognized her from the news coverage. Emma Johnson, a 17-year-old high school student who had become an unexpected leader in the protest movement. "This isn't just about one police captain." Emma's voice rang out clear and strong. "This is about a system that treats people differently based on the color of their skin. This is about corruption that turns law enforcement into a business designed to profit from injustice." The crowd roared its approval, their energy building like a rising tide. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized the scope of what was happening. Her individual nightmare had become a catalyst for something much larger, a movement that transcended her personal situation. Emma's voice cut through the noise again. "I was here that night. I saw everything. I recorded everything. And I have footage that the police department doesn't want you to see." She held up her phone and the crowd fell silent with anticipation. "I started recording before Officer Reeves even entered the mall. I saw him meet with mall security. I saw them plan what they were going to do. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, calculated harassment. Sarah pushed closer to the front, her heart pounding as she realized the implications. If Emma had footage of pre-planning of coordination between Reeves and mall security before any alleged crime had occurred, it would destroy any remaining credibility in the official police report. Emma continued her teenage voice, carrying the moral authority of someone who had witnessed injustice firsthand. I've been documenting what happens at this mall for months. The targeting, the harassment, the false arrests. I have videos of other people being treated exactly the same way Captain Williams was treated. The crowd's energy reached a fever pitch. Signs waved in the air. Emma tells the truth. Teenagers see what adults ignore. Listen to our youth. Sarah noticed that mall security had retreated completely from the main entrance. The few stores that remained open had skeleton crews, and most had simply closed for the day rather than try to operate during the protest. The economic impact was immediate and undeniable. Through the crowd, Sarah spotted several familiar faces, other victims of the arrest scheme that she and Maria had been investigating. They stood together in a loose group, some holding signs with their own stories, others simply bearing witness to the moment when their suffering finally had a voice. Margaret Thompson, a 62-year-old grandmother who had been arrested for suspicious behavior while waiting for her daughter outside a clothing store. James Patterson, a college student who had been charged with theft after asking to try on an expensive watch. Linda Davis, a single mother who had spent 3 days in jail and lost her job after being falsely accused of shoplifting. Each of them had been processed through the same system, pressured into plea bargains, forced into the profitable probation scheme that had generated thousands of dollars for the corrupt network. Now they stood together, their individual voices joining into a chorus that could no longer be ignored or silenced. Local news crews circulated through the crowd, conducting interviews, gathering footage that would dominate the evening broadcasts. National media had started arriving as well, recognizing that this story had implications far beyond one city's problems. Sarah noticed Officer Martinez standing at the edge of the crowd, no longer in uniform, but clearly recognizable from the arrest video. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around nervously, as if hoping no one would notice him. Several protesters had indeed recognized him, and they kept their distance, but maintained visual contact, their phones ready to document anything he might do. Near the mall's side entrance, Sarah spotted something that made her blood boil. Officer Reeves stood with 2 other men in expensive suits, all 3 of them watching the protest with expressions of barely contained rage. One of the men was speaking animatedly into a phone, his gestures aggressive and frustrated. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd continued to grow. People were arriving from neighboring cities, some driving hours to add their voices to the protest. Food trucks had set up at the parking lot's edges, turning the demonstration into something approaching a festival of resistance. Emma Johnson took the megaphone again, and this time she looked directly toward where Sarah was standing in the crowd. Somehow, despite the disguise, the teenager had recognized her. "Captain Sarah Williams is here with us today," Emma announced, and the crowd erupted in cheers. She's here because she believes in justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who has been victimized by this corrupt system. Sarah felt hundreds of eyes turn toward her, and she knew her moment of anonymity was over. Slowly, she removed her sunglasses and baseball cap, revealing herself to the crowd that had gathered in her name. The response was overwhelming. People surged forward, not aggressively, but with genuine warmth and support. Hands reached out to touch her shoulders, voices called out encouragement and thanks. For the first time since her suspension, Sarah felt the power of community, the strength that came from knowing she was not alone. Speech, speech. The crowd began chanting, but Sarah shook her head. This wasn't her moment to speak. It was her moment to listen, to absorb the energy and determination of people who refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. But Emma pressed the megaphone into her hands anyway, and the crowd fell silent with expectation. Sarah looked out over the sea of faces, young and old, every race and ethnicity united by a shared commitment to justice. 3 weeks ago, I thought I was just buying a birthday present for my niece. Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. I never imagined that one evening of shopping would expose a criminal conspiracy that has been destroying lives for years. The crowd listened intently as Sarah continued. But what I've learned is that corruption thrives in darkness. It depends on victims staying silent, on communities staying divided, on good people looking the other way. Today you have shown that the darkness is ending. She paused, looking toward the mall where Reeves and his associates were still watching. To those who think they can intimidate us into silence, who think they can use their badges and their authority to victimize innocent people, I want you to see this crowd. I want you to understand that we are not going anywhere. We will not be silenced, and we will not rest until justice is served. The crowd exploded in cheers that could be heard for blocks in every direction. Car horns honked in support from the surrounding streets. Even some of the mall employees who were watching from windows began applauding. As the sun began to set, Sarah realized that everything had changed. The lonely, desperate woman who had been suspended and criminally charged had been replaced by someone much more powerful, a symbol of resistance, a catalyst for change, a leader in a movement that would not be stopped. The protest was just the beginning. Tomorrow, there would be city council meetings, to attend media interviews, to give legal strategies to plan. But tonight, surrounded by thousands of people who refused to accept injustice, Sarah Williams felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. The war against corruption was far from over, but for the first time, Sarah knew they were going to win. The city council chambers had never seen anything like it. What was typically a sleepy Tuesday evening meeting attended by a handful of residents and local reporters had transformed into a packed auditorium buzzing with electric tension. Every seat was filled with overflow crowds standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallways. Local news crews had set up cameras at multiple angles, while national media representatives jockeyed for position near the speaker's podium. Sarah Williams sat in the third row, flanked by Maria Rodriguez and Amanda Foster, who had insisted on attending despite her injuries. The past week since the massive protest had been a whirlwind of media interviews, legal strategy sessions, and mounting public pressure on city officials to take action. Tonight was the culmination of everything they had been working toward. Mayor Patricia Henderson looked visibly uncomfortable as she surveyed the packed chamber. City council meetings were supposed to be predictable affairs, dealing with zoning permits and budget allocations, not explosive corruption scandals that threatened to bring down half the police department. She fidgeted with her gavel, clearly hoping to maintain some semblance of control over what promised to be a volatile evening. Before we begin tonight's public comment period, Mayor Henderson announced, her voice slightly shaky. I want to remind everyone that we have a 3-minute time limit for speakers, and we ask that all comments remain civil and respectful. A murmur of barely contained laughter rippled through the crowd. After weeks of documented police brutality, false arrests, and systematic corruption, the mayor's plea for civility seemed almost absurd. But Sarah appreciated the irony. They were about to expose a criminal conspiracy using the very democratic processes that the corrupt system had tried to undermine. The first few speakers were community activists and civil rights leaders, each building the case for immediate reform and accountability. Their words were passionate but measured, designed to establish the moral framework for what Sarah knew would be the evening's main event. Then Emma Johnson approached the podium carrying a laptop and a portable speaker. The 17-year-old looked impossibly young under the chamber's harsh fluorescent lights, but her presence commanded immediate attention from everyone in the room. My name is Emma Johnson, and I'm a senior at Riverside High School. She began, her voice clear and steady despite the magnitude of the moment. 3 weeks ago, I witnessed the false arrest of Captain Sarah Williams at Riverside Mall. But what I'm about to show you proves that what happened to her wasn't random, wasn't a mistake, and wasn't the result of a few bad actors. She opened her laptop and connected it to the chamber's audio-visual system. I've been documenting suspicious activity at Riverside Mall for over 6 months, ever since I saw my older brother arrested there on bogus charges. What you're about to see is footage that was recorded 20 minutes before Captain Williams ever entered the jewelry store. The main screen flickered to life, showing grainy but clear security footage from the mall's main corridor. Sarah's heart began racing as she recognized the scene. The same area where she had first noticed being followed by mall security. Watch carefully, Emma narrated as the video played. There's Officer Reeves entering the mall at 7:43 p.m. He's not responding to any emergency call because none had been made yet. He goes directly to the security office where he meets with Thompson and Martinez. The footage showed exactly what Emma described. Reeves, still in uniform, walking with obvious purpose toward a door marked "Security Personnel Only." He disappeared inside, staying for nearly 10 minutes before emerging with Thompson and Martinez in tow. "Now watch this," Emma continued, advancing the video. At 7:52 p.m., they take positions throughout the mall. Reeves positions himself near the food court with a clear view of the jewelry section. Thompson and Martinez spread out to create a surveillance pattern. They're waiting for someone. Sarah felt sick as she watched the three men coordinate their positions, like hunters setting up an ambush. The premeditation was undeniable, captured in high-definition video that would be impossible to explain away or discredit. At 8:06 p.m., Captain Williams enters the mall. Emma continued, "Watch how quickly Thompson and Martinez move to begin following her. They don't wait to observe any suspicious behavior. They start surveillance immediately based solely on her appearance." The video showed Sarah's entrance, her relaxed demeanor as she began what should have been a simple shopping trip. The contrast between her innocent purpose and the coordinated stalking that began the moment she appeared was stark and damning. Murmurs of outrage began rippling through the chamber as the implications became clear. This wasn't reactive security work. This was predatory hunting with a racial component that no one could deny. Emma paused the video and turned to address the council directly. "This pattern repeats itself every single day at Riverside Mall. I have documented 47 separate incidents over the past 6 months where black shoppers were targeted for surveillance and harassment using this exact same methodology." She clicked to a new presentation showing a grid of faces, all black, all young to middle-aged, all photographed being arrested or detained at the mall. These are the people who were processed through what I call the Riverside Pipeline. Targeted surveillance, false accusations, arrests on bogus charges, plea bargains leading to probation with a private company that charges excessive fees. The evidence was overwhelming and methodically presented. Sarah felt a surge of pride watching this teenager dismantle a criminal conspiracy with the kind of thoroughness that would have impressed veteran detectives. Mayor Henderson interrupted, clearly hoping to limit the damage. "Miss Johnson, while we appreciate your civic engagement, these are serious allegations that require proper investigation through appropriate channels." "The appropriate channels have been corrupted," Emma replied without hesitation. "Internal Affairs buried complaints. Supervisors took bribes to look the other way. The district attorney's office fast-tracked plea bargains without investigating the underlying arrests." She clicked to another slide showing a complex organizational chart. "This is the network of corruption that has been operating for at least 2 years. Mall security identifies targets. Officers like Reeves make arrests based on false accusations. Judges like the Honorable Robert Martinez rubber stamp plea agreements. Riverside Supervision Services collects fees. Everyone profits except the victims." The chamber had gone completely silent except for the clicking of camera shutters and the soft hum of recording equipment. Even Mayor Henderson seemed stunned by the scope of what was being revealed. Sarah rose from her seat, feeling the moment had come for her to take the podium. The crowd parted as she walked forward, their faces showing mixtures of anger, determination, and hope. This was her moment to speak truth to power, to use her own experience as a catalyst for systemic change. "My name is Captain Sarah Williams," she began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the packed chamber. 22 years ago, I took an oath to serve and protect this community. Tonight, I'm here to expose how that oath has been perverted by criminals wearing badges." She looked directly at the council members, noting which ones avoided eye contact and which ones leaned forward with apparent interest. "What happened to me at Riverside Mall wasn't an isolated incident of racial profiling. It was one operation in a systematic criminal enterprise designed to extract money from vulnerable communities through false arrests and coercive plea bargains." Sarah opened her own folder containing the evidence she and Maria had painstakingly assembled. "I have bank records showing cash payments to at least 12 officers across 3 precincts. I have documented communication between mall executives and police supervisors coordinating arrest quotas. I have victim statements from 65 people who were processed through this criminal pipeline." The chamber erupted in angry shouts and demands for immediate action. Signs appeared throughout the audience. "Arrest the real criminals. Justice cannot be bought. Prosecute police corruption." Mayor Henderson banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order, but the crowd's energy was too powerful to contain. They had been patient through months and years of injustice, and now that the truth was finally being exposed, their voices would not be silenced. Sarah continued speaking, her voice rising above the noise. This corruption has destroyed families, created criminal records for innocent people, and generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in illegal profits. The officers involved haven't just violated their oaths. They've committed federal crimes, including conspiracy, extortion, and civil rights violations. She paused, letting the weight of those charges sink in. I am calling on the FBI to immediately investigate this criminal enterprise. I am calling on the district attorney to review every case processed through the Riverside pipeline. And I am calling on this city council to take immediate action to protect our community from the criminals who have been posing as law enforcement. The standing ovation that followed seemed to shake the building's foundation. People cheered, wept, embraced strangers, and held their phones high to capture a moment they sensed would be remembered as a turning point in their city's history. From the back of the chamber, Sarah noticed several men in dark suits moving toward the exits. She recognized FBI Special Agent Catherine Morrison, whose presence suggested that federal investigators had been listening to every word. The net was closing around the corrupt network faster than they could react. Mayor Henderson finally managed to restore enough order to speak. In light of the serious allegations presented tonight, I am announcing the formation of a special investigative committee with full subpoena power to examine these claims. We will also be requesting immediate federal oversight of our police department, pending resolution of these matters. The crowd roared its approval, but Sarah knew the real work was just beginning. Investigations took time. Prosecutions required airtight cases, and institutional reform demanded sustained political pressure. But tonight had shown that truth, when supported by evidence and amplified by community action, was more powerful than any corrupt system. As she left the podium, Sarah felt Emma Johnson grab her hand. "We did it," the teenager whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We actually did it." Sarah squeezed her hand gently. "No, Emma, you did it. All of you did it. I just helped shine a light on what you had already discovered." The revolution had begun, and there would be no turning back. 6 months after the explosive city council meeting that had shattered the corrupt network, Sarah Williams walked through the same entrance of Riverside Mall where her nightmare had begun. But everything was different now. The atmosphere felt lighter, somehow cleaner, as if the building itself had been purged of the toxic energy that had poisoned it for so long. The transformation was visible everywhere she looked. New security personnel wore uniforms with prominent name tags and body cameras, their demeanor professional but welcoming rather than predatory. Signs throughout the mall proclaimed equal treatment for all customers in multiple languages, while customer service desks displayed information about shopper rights and complaint procedures. Sarah paused at the central fountain where she had first felt the uncomfortable sensation of being watched. Today, families relaxed on the surrounding benches while children played freely. Teenagers hung out in groups without drawing suspicious glances from security. Elderly shoppers browsed at their own pace without being followed or harassed. The federal investigation had moved with surprising speed once the evidence became public. FBI raids had swept through police precincts, the mall's corporate offices, and the homes of key conspirators. The arrests had been swift and comprehensive. Officer Michael Reeves, Lieutenant Harris, mall executives, and even Judge Martinez found themselves on the wrong side of handcuffs for the first time in their careers. The trials had been front-page news for months. Reeves, faced with overwhelming evidence, including Emma Johnson's videos and the financial records Maria Rodriguez had uncovered, had accepted a plea bargain that would keep him in federal prison for the next 8 years. His cooperation had helped prosecutors build cases against the other conspirators, creating a domino effect that brought down the entire network. Sarah's own criminal charges had been dismissed within days of the city council meeting, with the district attorney personally apologizing for what he called a gross miscarriage of justice. Her badge and gun had been returned with full honors along with back pay and a formal letter of commendation from the mayor's office. But more satisfying than her personal vindication was the systematic change that had followed. The FBI had reviewed every arrest made at Riverside Mall over the past 3 years, leading to the dismissal of over 200 bogus charges. Victims of the corrupt scheme were receiving financial compensation, criminal records were being expunged, and families torn apart by false arrests were being reunited. Riverside Supervision Services had been shut down permanently, its assets seized to help compensate victims. The mall's ownership had changed hands after the original company filed for bankruptcy in the wake of massive civil lawsuits. The new owners had implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination policies and hired community liaisons to ensure fair treatment for all shoppers. Sarah made her way toward Diamond Dreams, which had also undergone major changes. Jennifer Martinez had been fired and faced civil lawsuits from multiple victims, while the store had been sold to new owners who had completely overhauled their staff and policies. The current manager, a friendly black woman named Patricia Johnson, greeted Sarah with genuine warmth. "Captain Williams, it's so wonderful to see you again. How can we help you today?" "I'm here to finally buy that birthday present," Sarah said with a smile. "My niece Emma turned 17 next week, and I think she's earned something very special." Patricia's eyes lit up with understanding. "Would you like to see our selection of moon necklaces? We have some beautiful new pieces that just arrived." Sarah nodded, remembering the original necklace that had triggered the entire confrontation. That piece had been entered into evidence and would probably spend years in storage as part of the legal proceedings. But the symbolism felt right, replacing something tainted by corruption with something clean and new. As Patricia unlocked the display case, Sarah reflected on the young woman who would receive this gift. Emma Johnson had become something of a local celebrity, her courage and determination inspiring young people across the country. She had testified before Congress about police reform, spoken at universities about civic engagement, and started a non-profit organization dedicated to documenting and preventing police misconduct. "This is our most popular piece," Patricia said, holding up a delicate silver necklace with a crescent moon surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the light like stars. "The craftsmanship is exceptional, and it comes with our lifetime warranty." Sarah examined the piece carefully, imagining how it would look against Emma's neck. The teenager had grown and matured tremendously over the past months, handling media attention and legal proceedings with grace beyond her years. She deserved something that reflected both her youth and her wisdom. "It's perfect," Sarah said. "I'll take it." The transaction proceeded smoothly professionally, with none of the tension or suspicion that had characterized her previous visit. Patricia wrapped the necklace in elegant packaging, including a handwritten note thanking Sarah for her business. As Sarah prepared to leave, she noticed a small crowd gathering near the mall's main entrance. Her heart skipped a beat, wondering if there was some new crisis developing. But as she moved closer, she realized people were simply recognizing her and wanting to express their gratitude. Captain Williams called out an elderly man she recognized as James Patterson's grandfather. "My grandson got into college thanks to what you did. His record was expunged, and now he has a future again." A young mother approached with her teenage daughter. "This is Captain Williams' honey," she told the girl. "She's the reason you can shop here without being followed by security guards." The impromptu gathering grew larger as word spread through the mall that Sarah was there. But unlike the angry crowd that had surrounded her arrest 6 months earlier, this group was filled with joy and celebration. People shared stories of how the corruption scandal's exposure had changed their lives, their community, their faith in justice. Emma Johnson appeared at the edge of the crowd, now taller, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who had looked power in the eye and refused to blink. She pushed through the group to reach Sarah, her face glowing with happiness. "I heard you were here," Emma said, embracing Sarah warmly. "How does it feel to be back?" Sarah looked around at the transformed mall, at the diverse crowd of supporters, at the young woman whose courage had made all of this possible. "It feels like justice," she said simply. "Better than that," Emma replied with a grin. "It feels like home." Later that evening, Sarah sat in her apartment reviewing the final report from the FBI investigation. The numbers were staggering. Over 300 victims identified more than $2 million in illegal fees, collected 12 law enforcement officers indicted, and 5 civilians convicted of conspiracy charges. But beyond the statistics lay the human stories that gave meaning to their struggle. Margaret Thompson had gotten her job back and received a promotion. James Patterson was thriving in college with plans to become a civil rights lawyer. Linda Davis had opened her own small business with money from the Victim Compensation Fund. The police department itself had undergone comprehensive reform. New leadership, enhanced training programs, civilian oversight boards, and mandatory body cameras had transformed the culture from within. Sarah had been promoted to deputy chief, putting her in position to ensure that the changes were permanent and meaningful. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Emma Johnson's number. Aunt Sarah. Emma's voice was warm with affection. They had grown so close during the legal proceedings that the honorary title felt completely natural. I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done. Emma, you were the one who had the courage to document what was happening, to speak truth to power when it mattered most. I should be thanking you. We both did what was right, Emma said, but I've been thinking about what comes next. There are other cities dealing with similar corruption, other communities that need help. What would you think about us working together on some of these cases? Sarah smiled, feeling a surge of pride and hope. The student had become the teacher ready to take their fight for justice to a broader stage. I think that sounds like exactly what this world needs. After ending the call, Sarah walked to her window and looked out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, other victims were still waiting for justice. Other communities were struggling against corruption and abuse of power. The fight was far from over, but tonight she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete confidence that good would ultimately triumph over evil. The moon hung full and bright in the clear night sky, its silver light bathing the city in gentle radiance. Tomorrow, a 17-year-old hero would receive a necklace that celebrated both her youth and her extraordinary courage. But tonight, Sarah Williams stood at her window and smiled, knowing that justice had not only been served, but that it would continue to shine as brightly as the moon itself, illuminating the path forward for generations to come. The nightmare at Riverside Mall had ended. The dream of a more just society had just begun.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.